'Cause you can't, you won't, and you don't stop. Or when you can't, you won't, and you don't stop.
Managed to have a look at how people can work with one another in business, or at least the legal basis for that, with agency law, which gives us contractual liability, and vicarious liability, which is where one person is liable for the conduct of another. Okay, so those things arise no matter what kind of legal structure that you have. It's, for want of a better term, the building blocks on which business occurs. Now we want to start thinking about decisions that you can make or not make, as we'll see. And we want to talk about how you might structure your business. So to do that, we're going to need to delve into the basic entities, the basic legal forms that you can use to operate a business. Now, we're not going to get through every potential form that is involved in commercial activities. There are things like incorporated associations that we're not going to deal with. We deal with the core ones and the main attributes of them. So we're not going to deal with everything in detail, and if you were going to set up a business, obviously you'd want to speak to a professional about it, but it will give you an idea about these different forms and which one you should probably be tending towards when you're thinking about starting your own business. So let's get into these different ways of structuring your organisation. Now, in terms of the forms that we're going to deal with, we're going to deal with the most common, which are sole trader, partnership, trust, and company or corporation. Now, with companies, they're by far the most popular for substantial business, and we'll come into why they are. But there also are quite a number of sole traders and some partnerships still around there. I also want to go through some of these forms so that you can understand why they're used and when they're used, and what are some tips and tricks for us when we actually go into the business world. For instance, with partnerships, making sure that maybe we don't end up in a partnership when we didn't want to be in one. Okay, so we'll get into why I would say that when we get to talk about partnership. But these are the main types of business structures that you should be familiar with if you're going to get a business degree. Now, the basic approach that we're dealing with here is an extension of what we did right back at the beginning of the subject, that we have this rule of law which is critical to the business environment and society as a whole. This rule of law allows you and others to actually protect your rights so that society can advance and that we can make sure we look after ourselves and others. So one of the challenges with business is that we often have lots of different people who want different things. So for instance, if we had a company like Tesla is something that people will be familiar with, if they're going to produce a car, they've got suppliers, customers, employees, managers, shareholders, the government, the community. All of these people will have different expectations of the company and want different things, and they all will need a way to have their rights protected and to hold those making decisions at Tesla accountable for their actions. So to do that, we've got a number of different approaches to these differing rights and responsibilities. And the basic starting point is that these rights vary with how someone structures their business. So therefore, this choice of structure is critical. Okay? It's critical to business and the various parties' rights and responsibilities. It will impact things such as your ability to raise capital, how you can share profit, your obligations to disclose information, etc. A whole lot of things change with the business structure. Now, what choices do we have with business structure? Well, broadly speaking, we're going to deal with the main types, which are sole trader, partnership, trust, company, and other kinds of corporations. Not because we'll probably set them up, but we're probably going to run across them in business, run across GOCs, as they're known, government-owned corporations and statutory authorities. So they're the kind of 5 kinds of entities we're going to be introduced to. Now, many of these structures have a subtly different purpose. So you'll notice that last one that I talked about on the previous slide, these other corporations, GOCs, statutory authorities, right? These are kinds of corporations that manage the public interest or society's interest, right? They're a way that we regulate that we regulate and supply goods and services that are essential to parts of society. So these are more about public interests, right? These other corporations. At the other end, we have an entity, the trust, which is specifically put in place so that one person can manage someone else's interests. Okay, so this is where you're not looking after yourself, but how do you look after someone else? Okay, that's the primary reason that we would have a trust. And then we have kind of the main commercial forms, the traditional approach to business where it's about you wanting to make money. That would be sole trader, partnership where you're working with a few people, and the company where you're working with a lot of people. So that's the reason that we're choosing these forms. And you can see that the different forms have a different focus in why we might have them, particularly in terms of the trust and these other statutory bodies. So how do you choose which structure is best for you? Well, there's no one answer, right? It's a combination of factors. Essentially, we want to understand how easy is it to set up this kind of business? Will you be able to raise capital in this kind of business structure? What are the implications for your personal liability if you use this particular structure? How difficult will it be and how costly will it be to keep this business structure running? Because that's going to vary. So we can see that there are all these factors that you need to consider when you're thinking about the business structure you want to operate under. And that's why understanding them all and their advantages and disadvantages can be so important.